The Jewish Talmud states that the ark was non-existent in Herod's temple. In fact, when that second temple was destroyed by the Romans in AD 70, so Josephus, the historian, tells us, nothing was found in the Holy of Holies, including the ark. American archaeologist Ronald Wyatt, now a dear friend and colleague, was walking one afternoon outside the Damascus Gate of Jerusalem, and he was accompanied by a local authority on Roman antiquities. And they were about 200 metres north of the city wall in front of the escarpment known as Skull Hill. You can see the skull face here. There are the eyes and the nose, and so on. This always has been, and still is, the only place in Jerusalem known as Skull Hill. And these two men, Ron Wyatt and the antiquities expert, were talking about Roman pottery as they walked past this area. And suddenly, Ron's left arm shot out, and he said, "There's Jeremiah's grotto! The Ark of the Covenant's in there!" Immediately, he thought, why did I say that? I wasn't even thinking about it. I don't even know where the Ark of the Covenant could be. While he stood in stunned silence, the other man, quite out of character, also reacted strangely. "That's wonderful," he said. "We want you to excavate." The next day, when Ron went for a drive with a head of the Department of Antiquities in Tel Aviv, he told him of his experience and showed him the permit from the landowner. Immediately, the Israeli official granted him an exploratory permit. Actually, an official excavation permit can be granted only to a full-time archaeologist who must be connected with an acceptable sponsoring institution such as a university. Well, in this regard, Ron did not qualify, but he was given a permit. He mumbled something about having to go back home to America the next day because their Apex flight ticket was expiring the next day. And they had no time. They would have to return the next season. And furthermore, Ron would have to research to see why the Ark of the Covenant should even be there. I myself, in my investigations, would go down the same road. I set out, friends, with a briefcase full of objections against Ron Wyatt and his work. I could have sat in an ivory tower, ad-libbing objections of other people, or I could put my money where my mouth was and go out myself. It would cost me everything I had and prove the man wrong. I would lead my expeditions, and in 5 years I would lead or accompany 19 expeditions in the Middle East, and I would go down the same road of investigation that Ron Wyatt went down, quite independently. Now you'll notice, friends, that there are two mountains under Old Jerusalem. Mount Zion and Mount Moriah. And on the east of the old city wall is the Mount of Olives. Mount Moriah is that place mentioned in the book of Genesis with reference to the story of the patriarch Abraham, from whom are descended the Jews and the Arab. And Abraham was instructed to go to Mount Moriah and sacrifice his son, which was something he knew was not right to do. And yet, because he believed he should always obey his Lord, he went to the mountain. And Isaac said to his father, "Father, here's the wood, here's the fire, but where's the animal to sacrifice?" Well, Abraham made a statement to Isaac which would turn out to be very prophetic. He said, "The Lord will provide himself a lamb. In the mount of the Lord it shall be seen." Was this a cryptic prophecy that one day on this very mountain the Lord would provide himself as a sacrifice? When Abraham was about to lift that knife, the Lord stopped him and said, "Abraham, you have shown now that you would be faithful even to giving up your only son. Now, don't kill the lad. Here is a ram caught in the bushes." And that ram, that animal, became a symbol of the coming Messiah who would die. Could it be that the Messiah would die on that very same mountain? Now Jerusalem, the old city wall marked by this dark line, and Mount Moriah marked by the thicker line. You'll notice Mount Moriah is partly inside the old city and partly on the outside of the old city. On the western side of Jerusalem there was a very steep valley, likewise on the south and east, and this meant that any army coming to attack Jerusalem would find it difficult to attack from those three directions. But from the north it was comparatively easy to overrun the city. It was elevated, you see, by this mountain on the outside of the wall. So the early kings of Israel cut a dry moat on the outside of the wall, which effectively made it difficult for enemies to come across. This cut the mountain into two sections. Now Ron was walking north of the Damascus Gate in this area in front of Skull Hill, which was a part of old Mount Moriah when that incident occurred. In this picture we're looking from outside the city back toward the city. Here is the city wall. This white line indicates the extent of Mount Moriah, part of Mount Moriah being inside the city and part being outside, and there is the dry moat in front of the city wall. And Skull Hill is on this escarpment down here. Now, friends, if the Ark of the Covenant and the other temple vessels were going to be hidden, and if Jeremiah knew that the city was about to be destroyed by the soldiers of Babylon, it might not be very wise to hide the Ark of the Covenant inside the city. Outside the city was another wall, a temporary siege wall built by the soldiers of Babylon, constructed at a safe distance from the city to avoid any missiles that might be shot at them from within. And in between there was a no man's land. Now it might not be easy to smuggle the ark out through the Babylonian siege wall, but it could perhaps make sense for it to be hidden somewhere inside the no man's land. And the experience Ron Wyatt had that day was well within the area of that former no man's land. So the following year Ron came back with two others to begin excavation, truckloads of rubble would first have to be taken away. Now, in ancient times, when a city was destroyed, they would simply knock down what was left and build on top of the rubble. This could occur on the same site many times, and successive levels would rise progressively higher over the centuries. You will notice that in front of Mount Moriah the land is elevated. Centuries of rubble had been piling up in front of the cliff face, as we see in this old photograph. So to get down to the Babylonian level, it would be necessary to dig down in front of the cliff through this rubble. The hope was to find a cave that might be down at the original ground level. And so the excavation began. Immediately in front of the cliff face, progressively deeper and deeper. Well, it was not long before there were uncovered several niches resembling recessed bookcases. And as the digging went deeper, there were found to be 3 of these. This triggered ideas of a possible event which required signs to be placed in these niches for the public to see. For you see, a public road used to run along the front of this cliff face. That's team member Bob Murrell on the left, and myself beside one of these niches in the cliff. And it is very close to the place of the skull. The report of Jesus' crucifixion states quite clearly that the place of crucifixion occurred at the place of a skull. The Roman historian Quintilian said this: "Whenever we crucify criminals, very crowded highways are chosen, so that many shall see it, and be moved by fear of it, because all punishment does not pertain so much to revenge as to example." You see, friends, the purpose of crucifixion was to frighten the population into not doing what this crucified victim had done. They made an example of them, and they placed crucifixion sites beside public highways. Now, it is commonly assumed, is it not, that Jesus Christ was crucified on top of a hill. However, in my research I went through the Gospels, but I did not find one statement in the Scriptures that Jesus Christ was crucified on top of a hill. Did you know that? Where then did we get this idea? Could it be that we have grown accustomed to the concept of the crucifixion taking place on top of a hill because our artists over the centuries have thus imagined it to be? And one artist, of course, follows another. But the Scripture says something different. It says, "They that passed by railed on him, wagging their heads." Now, friends, the road did not go up the cliff face and over the top. The road went around the front of the cliff face, around the bottom. And that would be much easier for people to pass by, of course. The people were passing by the crucifixion site. The crucifixion site was beside a public thoroughfare. That is, according to the Scriptures. Ron and the team decided to make these signs and place them up in the niches to see how well they could be read by people passing by.